Welcome to BEP Live on the Black Executive Perspective Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Tidbit. If this is your first time coming to BEP Live, we cut through the noise and get straight to what matters: power, culture, leadership, and real conversations shaping how we move forward. No filters, no safe takes, just honest dialogue and real accountability. Let's get into it. So tonight, we're talking about something that's real, something that's sensitive, and something I think we need to approach with both honesty and responsibility. Number one, we know racism is real. Systemic barriers are real. That isn't even up for debate. But here's the question. Once we identify the problem, what's the strategy? Because awareness without strategy doesn't change outcomes. We've had one of the biggest awareness moments in modern history over the last few years. More conversations, more visibility, more acknowledgement. But have we seen the same level of progress when it comes to execution? I don't think so. So that's what we're going to unpack tonight. And so I'm not doing this alone. I got some really sharp people who are going to join me in this conversation. First, let me introduce Felicia Smith, who is CEO of the Climb organization. Felicia Smith, welcome to A Black Executive Perspective and BEP Live.
Thank you so much for the invite. Happy to be here.
Awesome. And then number two is I have Keith Johnson, who is one of the most prominent criminal defense attorneys in the country, as well as a juvenile judge down in the Atlanta area. Keith, welcome to BEP Live.
Tony, thanks for having me once again. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Well, I'm glad you guys are taking the time to come here and talk about this conversation, because this is something very important. And I'm glad you guys, I know you guys got busy lives and stuff to that nature. So it's very important that we have this conversation. Now, here's the thing. We've been becoming very clear on what the problems are. But clarity on the problem and clarity on the strategy are two different things. And where I think we are right now, we've already elevated awareness, but we haven't matched it with the same level intentional execution. So the question becomes, and I'm going to kick this off to Felicia, and look, don't be looking for me to call on you, all right? I want you guys to jump in and share your thoughts. And the same thing with the audience. We need you to be a part of this conversation. We want to hear your thoughts, so don't hesitate to stop. Jump into the chat, throw it in, and we'll throw it up on the screen, and we'll dive with your questions and your statements as well. But Felicia, let me ask you this question as we kick this off. Are we spending just as much time building solutions as we are identifying problems?
Absolutely not. I think we've become really good at identifying problems, and we throw a couple things at it. We'll throw a couple of things on the problem. We'll talk about unconscious bias. We'll talk about bias, and we'll say, hey, let's bring everybody in the room and teach them about this thing. But that's not actually a strategy. That's still more awareness. That doesn't get to, okay, what are we going to do about the actual problem? How are we going to move the needle forward in terms of organizations having less instances of gaslighting or less instances of people of color not being able to even move because of racism. So just talking about it and doing trainings isn't enough. We have to figure out and create measures on how we're going to move forward. And I don't think we're there.
Keith, your thoughts, my brother.
Well, racism is a part of the fabric of this country, unfortunately. And so we have seen the evolution from the summer of 2020 with George Floyd and the mass protests, and how corporate America responded. I know, Tony, you and I have had those private conversations, but it goes beyond just the racism awareness and the mandatory trainings and the sensitivity trainings, because it is our community that has to essentially take care of each other. And you do that through education, awareness, but also trying to reach back and help those who are coming along a similar path. And so it's a very nuanced issue, but it's one that I'm glad that we are talking about this evening.
Well, absolutely. And look, let's be clear, because you spoke about it, since the George Floyd murder in 2020, what was that, May of 2020, We've seen an increase in terms of racial awareness. We've seen an increase of number of people basically talking about these issues and rightfully so. So let's be clear here, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to make aware of what the problems are, right? However, 5, 6 years later, we still see Black professionals are still unrepresentative in the executive leadership positions. Okay. The racial wealth gap remains significant. So the question is, has things changed structurally? Okay. Because at the end of the day, we haven't seen the progress in terms of the numbers and the data in terms of us taking those steps forward, right? We definitely have more awareness. So I want to throw something out real quick before we dive in deeper in this, because one of the things I wanted to bring up today, or one of the things I want us to dive into, is strategy. Okay. At the end of the day, it's about strategy. And so a lot of times when we talk about strategy, sometimes people don't understand, well, what do you mean strategy? I mean, how can we come up with a strategy for this and that and the whole 9 yards, right? So I want us to back up and let's look at our history first. Okay. And let's see how the people before us, because let's be fair, I don't know if it was you, Keith, or I think it was Felicia, or maybe it was me, to be fair. This is not something that's new. All right. This is centuries in the making. Okay, to be fair, right? So our forefathers and mothers have been dealt with racism, and more importantly, structural racism for centuries. So let's take a look in terms of how they dealt with that from a strategy standpoint.
What strategies did activists use during the civil rights movement? In today's world, discussions about social justice and equality are more relevant than ever. Many people are seeking to understand the history of activism in the United States. One key moment in this journey was the civil rights movement. Activists used various strategies to fight for racial equality and justice. One of the most notable strategies was civil disobedience. Activists like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. challenged unjust laws. For instance, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. This act sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, which lasted nearly a year. The boycott ended with the Supreme Court ruling that racial segregation on public buses was unconstitutional. Another effective strategy was boycotts and economic pressure. The Montgomery bus boycott is a prime example of this approach. By refusing to ride the buses, activists significantly impacted the local economy. This pressure forced authorities to reconsider segregation policies. Lawsuits and legal challenges also played a crucial role. Landmark cases like Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka challenged the legality of segregation in public schools. The Supreme Court ruled that separate facilities were inherently unequal, overturning the previous ruling in Plessy versus Ferguson. Mass protests and rallies were essential in raising awareness. The 1963 March on Washington is one of the most famous events. It brought together large crowds advocating for civil rights and was instrumental in pushing for legislative change. Community-based activism helped build a strong foundation for the movement. Activists organized within their communities, using local networks to mobilize support for broader civil rights initiatives. This grassroots approach was vital for sustaining momentum. Understanding these strategies provides context for ongoing discussions about equality and justice today.
Let me hear your thoughts.
My initial thought is what's interesting about what was said is that there was one goal in mind, but there were multiple strategies. So oftentimes we try to approach it as we all have to be doing the same thing at the same time, but there were multiple strategies from education to law changes with one approach, but different strategies. And I think we try to just create one now and not multiple strategies, but they all had one goal in mind.
Also, in that time period, the racism was, I think, more pronounced, more egregious. You can't hide little black kids going to different schools than little white kids. Now it's a lot more subtle. And you can drive to certain parts of town and you can find a black millionaire. And you can drive to certain parts of town and you can find impoverished black communities. And so it's a lot more nuanced than it was a couple generations ago. And I think that makes it a lot more challenging because you have to get the community to care to the same level and have that community feel that says, you know what? I'm not going to go to that store. We had a Target boycott, and I think it was very successful. So there is still power in joint economic boycotting and other forms. But once again, you have to really focus on that. And it's harder when people seem to be more in their own spaces now than a few generations ago.
And that's the thing. That's the question I want to ask you in the audience, right? I wanted to hear from you guys too. What are your thoughts on this? At the end of the day, and let's be fair. Well, let me just say this. At the end of the day, yes, there was a population of black people that were more together in terms of fighting the wrongs of racism, right? And let's be fair, it's totally different than today, right? Like you said, it was more overt. You couldn't go to schools, you couldn't ride the bus. There was a million things even outside of those things, right? But at the end of the day, they came together and they fought it together. Now, was there 100%? Was every person 100? Of course not. There's always going to be people like, I don't know what you're talking about, or this and that. And maybe, and let's be fair too, there was situations where black people didn't want to get involved because, the white banker would call their loans. They would use other ways to stop them from boycotting or participating, even violence, to be fair, right? So I get that part, right? But at the end of the day, there still was the majority of people who came together who had a mindset together, right? In terms of being able to try to fight these things. And then to your point, Felicia, they use multiple things, right? And one of the things I want to dive into, you heard about the community coming together from a grassroots standpoint. Okay, we definitely going to dive into the economic standpoint, boycotting, because I want to talk about Target. But are we there as a community? Because at the end of the day, Keith, let's be fair. You're a prominent criminal defense attorney, right? A juvenile judge, all right? Let's be fair. You're in the South. Again, your finances or your what you make from a career, from where you live in and stuff to that nature. I think, remember when you were on our show, you said your grandfather, when he found out that you went to law school, he almost cried because you were doing something that they could not do. Okay. And then Felicia, same thing with you. You've built a business. You're prominent. You're an executive. All right. And so a lot of times when we start moving up the ladder, we kind of by ourselves, but we don't stay close to the community as we did back in the day when everybody was together and none of us was getting out. We started our own business and stuff, but in terms of rising into all these different type of roles and this and that. So does that also have an effect in terms of us having that get togetherness and still fighting these things together versus I already made it, I'm good, you guys got to work on your own? Let me hear you guys' thoughts.
Well, I started off, that is the main challenge as I see it, which is there are some of us who have found wild success or great success or sustainable success. How do you get that leadership of just the average person, not somebody that's overtly political, to come out of their suburban cocoon and do something that could risk their standing in other parts of their lives. Because just like you said, it is more easy to get people together after an event like what we saw in Minneapolis versus just staying at it consistently, because you have to have a goal. And what is the pronounced goal? A more equal society? Well, that's great, but it's a bit abstract versus police brutality or other things that have been just key touchstone issues in the past. And so I think that the disbursement of wealth in the community and also just the lack of one coherent issue to rally around is our generation's biggest challenge.
Keith, I agree. I mean, I think one of the challenges is that we're trying to rally around one issue, if I'm honest, right? Is that we're all trying to focus on one thing. And to your point, because we're in so many different economical standings, we don't have the same issues in terms of like that one pointed thing, but we're all experiencing an issue that leads back there. And so I think the challenge is for, the Black woman or male who's living in suburbia, who doesn't feel like they can rally around the Target thing doesn't resonate with them. There is something that is, right? And there is a portion of their life that they are experiencing racism or they are experiencing an issue. So how do we rally them around the issue that they're dealing with? And that's when I talk about there being different strategies to get to one issue. And to your point, Keith, it becomes abstract if you just say we're just all trying to get to more equality. What does that really mean? How does that look on a day-to-day basis? And what does that mean for that millionaire, billionaire who isn't experiencing a lot of these other things? And then the other piece we don't talk about is how do those people support in a way that may not be upfront. There's a whole bunch of discussion even before about like a Beyonce and Jay-Z and like, why are they not upfront in it? But they are in some ways because they're backing it and they're giving funding. And we feel like, well, that's not enough. And so I think there has to be a layered approach. It shouldn't just be, you have to do this thing to mean that you're a part of it. There's other ways to be a part of getting to more racial equality, to be honest.
Here's the thing though. So what's that old saying? What is it? Master of master of one and no expert of none. I forget how it goes.
Yes.
Jack of all trades.
Master of none. Right. And so, but there you go. So because, and let's be fair, let's go back. They fought around specific issues.
Yeah.
Okay. And at the end of the day, there's so many issues. And like you said, your issue is different than my issue. My issue could be, advancing in corporate America, right? Having more Black people, more people of color, Black and brown people, more people of color, be able to move up the ranks in corporate America. And what do we mean by that? Well, look, I got some stats here. Okay. So Black people make up 12% of the population. Okay. 12%. Senior leadership in corporate America is like 3 to 4%. Okay, think about that for a second. Okay, I'll get even more specific. I'll sound like my man in The Godfather. I'll even get more frank. So I'm not all dollars and cents. Okay, at the end of the day, the Fortune 500 started in 1960 something or 50 something, I believe. Right, there were no Black CEO, no Black people or women in the Fortune 500. Okay, the first woman that became in the Fortune 500, Fortune 500 CEOs of a CEO that's running one of the biggest companies in the world. Okay, the first woman was in 1972. This is around your area, where her husband was on the board. She ran the Washington Post. Her husband died. She took over, and then she became the Fortune 500 CEO. That was in 72. Okay, now let me ask you this question: how many Black people are on the Fortune 500? Okay. 4.
I was gonna say 5 just to be.
All right. 4. How many women are on the Fortune 500?
I believe it's 1 or 2, right?
70 something.
Oh, I thought you meant black women. So you're saying
No,
women.
no, it's only one black woman,
Okay,
but
yeah,
it's 70 something women that are on the Fortune 500. Okay, you see my point here? So, number one, there was none. And this is the other thing. How did that happen? Well, you got to recognize as black people with civil rights, what did we were fighting for, and what affirmative action came out of that, right? Which was really supposed to help us be able to move up, but it helped women. It helped us. You see my point here? Okay. So when I talk about 12% of the population in executive leadership positions, right? And we go back to 2020 and then the racial awakening happened, and these numbers were talked about. All right, everybody, we gotta, and then so this is where we gotta come up with a pipeline and mentorship and all these things to what? To make these numbers better, because there's a ton of talent that don't get the opportunity. And here's the thing, when you say opportunity, that doesn't mean they're not qualified. They are qualified, but they're not in the rooms. They're not part of the networks of the people that basically hire those individuals or recommend those. So that was supposed to be a fix. Remember? That was something, we're going to do this, and companies said we're going to do that, we're going to do this and do that. 6 years later, the numbers are still the same. Yeah. You see my point? So we had the awakening, right? So the awareness said, hey, this is wrong. But at the end of the day, we never were able to break through. And there was a lot of prominent people, to be fair, black and white, all different type of colors, who said, my girl Melanie Hobson, and I can name a ton of people that was like, I'm down with this and that. And the numbers are still the same. Okay, so that's just one area. And then we can go into, poverty. If we look at the numbers, right, at the end of the day, when we talk about wealth, the wealth gap, this is the numbers, and it's from Brookings, right? At the end of the day, where is it right? Oh, here it is right here, right? The median white household wealth is $285K. The median black household wealth is $44K. Okay? Home ownership is 72% white, 44% black. Okay, so my point is, we've had the awareness around all these issues, but the indicators haven't moved up. Is this more for us in terms of how we have to come up with a strategy to attack these things one by one? Or is this, I got mine, you got to get yours?
Yeah, well, I definitely think
it's a plethora of stuff, right? And so when there's a plethora of stuff, you're like, where do I go first? What do I work on?
But that goes back to the fact that the different challenges and issues. And so instead of us talking about rallying around one issue, we have to approach several of them, both from the top and the bottom, because we're talking, the statistics that you just gave are widely, different, and those are going to land on people differently. So instead of just talking about one strategy, how do we meet the moment of all of those things? Because they meet in the middle, right? As you talked about, whether it's the people who are on the Fortune 500 to the amount of executives, I call it that top tier that a lot of people not even pay attention to, but there is an audience for that. And so we should be having strategy conversations with those people about how they tackle that. But then there's also, to your point, economic inequality or home ownership. There should be a strategy for that. And all of that gets us back to the middle, but we can't approach it by just having one strategy for one thing.
I love that. I love it. I love it. Keith, what's your thoughts, buddy?
Yeah, and I see it from the criminal justice system. I see it from the standpoint of if we're waiting for the majority to come in and equalize things, well, that's just not going to happen. It starts with our own empowerment, with education, with making sure that our young people know the consequences of their actions, so that you're not a felon before you can vote in this country. That's what I'm seeing. And I'm seeing economic opportunities be limited before these young people even know the opportunities that they would have had. And so now you're walking through life a little bit as a second class citizen because you can't get higher education or you can't get the loans for it. And there are other things that are consequences of behavior as young people. And so, like Felicia said, it has to be a multi-tiered approach, I believe. And I always tell people, especially those of us who are in leadership, touch the people that you can touch, that you can come into contact with, because it can get so daunting to try to address an issue as large as this with so many people that you may not have any personal contact with, but we all are feeling different levels of the squeeze, like I like to refer to it as.
So this is Quell Frazier 2761 says the comfort zone stagnates the community activity. What do you guys thought about that?
Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, well, I think that that's kind of what we touched on, and that's a great observation, which is a comfort zone. If my daily life seems to be fine, I seem to be cool with the other parents on the youth soccer team, right? I have a good relationship with my employer or my cohorts. I may not feel what the person 10 miles down the road feels. And how do I continue to care about those things when I know that certain things come from personal choices and decisions as well? And so it is nuanced because racism is real. It exists. I see it. I see it in the court system. I try to fight it. But I also know sometimes decisions play into things as well, and that there are still opportunities. It might be a little tougher, but there still are opportunities that are available for all of us. You may not have the ability to make as many mistakes along the pathway if you
Right.
are a minority, but there are opportunities. So how do you merge both of those schools of thoughts and not sound like a bootstraps person, but also not sound like an apologist that every Black person's problems are because of white oppression too?
Right.
Right. It's a very nuanced approach that I know we all understand, but it is one that presents a challenge, I believe.
Let me throw this at you. So I just had Tone Falcon put this up and says a problem with a single broad strategy or multiple targeted strategies is that they need to be developed and driven by a leading organization. And as a community, we don't have a single organization capable. Hold on, let me put this other part up. Capable of community strategies. What's you guys' thoughts on that?
I don't know. I've heard this before. I don't know that I agree with that. So, we can talk about the Montgomery boycott, bus boycott, and we talk about MLK, but there also was Malcolm X, and there also were other prominent people that were doing it at the same time with the same goal in mind. I don't think we've ever really had a single organization in our community, particularly the Black community, that less of. We had prominent organizations, but I think the culmination of all of those things at the same time made it successful. Like made other things successful. So I don't know that if we're looking for a single organization to come together, I don't know that we'll ever get there. I mean, you
Most
think
likely
about
won't
what's going
happen.
on with the Target
Yeah,
situation and how that's
yeah,
gotten
yeah.
super messy
Yeah,
because you have three organizations which seemingly should have been able to come together to get us somewhere, and then it turned. So I don't know if I agree that it has to be a single organization. I think that there is merit in multiple organizations. I think the challenge we have is all rallying around the goal, and it not turning into I want to be at the forefront. I want to get the praise. Whole nother topic, but that's sometimes what happens in those scenarios. But I don't know that I agree that it has to be one organization.
Well, and let's be fair though, too. They didn't have, I mean, you just kind of spoke to it. You had the SCLC
Yep.
conference, then you
Yep.
had SNCC,
Yep.
SNICC, then you had a bunch of different stuff. Then you had the Black Panthers, you had
Yep.
Malcolm X. You had a ton of different organizations, and they wasn't cross-pollinating either. They were going about it the way they thought best to go about it. You had the bus riders, right? Down in Mississippi,
Yeah.
Freedom
Freedom
Riders,
Ride.
right?
Yeah.
So you had a ton of people doing a ton of different things because it's hard to have one organization because at the end of the day, it's just too many things to do. And plus, to be fair, the challenge is that, look, we got three of us here on this show, right? Number one, we all don't relate to everybody. Okay. And so one organization may not be able to pull the needle depending on what they're trying to do because they may not like the leaders. They may not like, or the way they're going about it is not in a way that's diplomatic or, what what I'm saying is, so if you have different people coming up, but all trying to do it, trying to attack it, you have a better chance of some of them breaking through, right? And so that's the thing. Let me ask you this though. I want to throw this up. And hold on one more time. I got one more here. Dr. King's daughter said the true power of civil rights movement was the multiple organizations come together under a single banner. And look, and maybe that's the case. But here again, where we are today, and this is what the struggle is. We're not together. Okay? We're dispersed because of the rights that we have achieved or received, should say, based on the civil rights and all of our forefathers, right? So we can vote, we can go get a job, we can buy a house, we can start a business. There's a million things that those guys couldn't do, right? And then here's the thing: there's people today that don't even know that history. All right, and so and that's their right, right? But people died for that, right? But the question I want to ask you guys: do you think the Black community is tight today as it was 50, 60 years ago?
I'm going to say no. I see Keith. You go ahead. I'm going to say
Don't
no.
be scared. Say what time it is. You know what I'm saying? We don't hold nothing back on BEP Live. Say your thoughts.
All the nuance that Keith talked about. It's because of where we are. We're in different places in terms of society, and we're going to call it classes system. We're in different places in terms of education and community. Our problems are different, and it's hard for us to rally together because some of us don't see ourselves as that's not my problem. Like we've talked about, that's your issue. That's not my issue. And so I don't think we're as close as we were as a community back then. I think, to be honest, I think technology plays a role in it also. Social media, and now we have more noise that's feeding into the zeitgeist. That's even when we're trying to get together, you got bots and things that are going on from other organizations that are coming in to try that are divisive and is trying to separate us. And so it's even more challenging to bring the Black community together because there's just so much noise. And I think that also plays in us, definitely, from my perspective, not being as tight as we were back then.
Keith, before you answer, because again, I just want to play this real quick. My point was that mobilization of the community is challenging. What organizations has I only had this up for a couple of seconds. I'm sorry. Let me put it back up. There we go. See, there we go. Oh, not even close. I'm picking on the wrong stuff. But before I'll come back to this shortly, but I want to play a quick little clip, Keith, and then I want to get your take on this. Based on about the Black community, as well as I want the audience to get the clip too. Now, this was down at the HBCU AI conference that I was at in Austin, Texas, a couple weeks ago.
People believe sometimes that other ice is colder, other grass is greener, and we don't support and lift up the two things that we have as a community, and that is the Black church and the Black college. They are ours. These
Right.
are this is what we think. What else do we have? What do we have? Name something. I'm Oprah. We give our Black businesses a hard time If a black dry cleaner messes
girl.
up your shirt one
Preach,
time, you like,
preach,
see,
preach.
now
That's
y'all
why-
can't.
Preach. It be your
let me
people.
just go back
It be
to
your-
Porter's or
Preach.
whatever.
It's
Let
so
me
true.
just do.
Right.
You know, you go
Preach.
to the restaurant and they out of something, and
black
you
dude fault.
like, see, you know, like
I'm not
man,
coming
we
here
can't-
again.
Exactly. But we will do that. But we won't give us grace. We do not give each other grace that we deserve, and we won't support our black businesses. We won't support our black institutions. If you did not go to a black college, it doesn't matter. It still belongs to you.
Right.
And you ought to, if you've made money, bring it back to the community. Bring it back to the community. I do every single thing I can to ensure that my dollar stays in our community. This black hair that has fallen, I got a black beautician. You know, the dollar that we spend, how do we continue? Put it in the black church. We want to say, Ties, the preacher ain't doing the right thing, and I ain't gonna give it anyway. You
Right.
giving money to places
Yes.
that you'll give it to save a whale, but you don't know what whale. You don't have a name from the whale that you just saved, but you will not give it to the black church that has a much better chance to do something for our community. Or we will not just pick an HBCU and say, you know what, I'm sending $500 to my local HBCU that's in my state, or I'm in California, I'm sending it to HT because I'm the closest one to California. That's a shame. But send it and know that it is going to change our community.
What's your guys' thoughts on that? And number one, that was Dr. Melva Wallace, who is the president of Houston Tillerson University in Austin, Texas. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, she makes some good points. I think her points are a little broad because, you know, you just can't paint it with that kind of brush in all phases. I would say as a society, we are all a little bit more independent now. Whether you blame it COVID, whether you blame it on getting on these stinking phones and feeling like we're more connected, but we're actually more isolated in person. But I definitely think that she makes some strong points because if you have a sense of community, you can have a sense of empowerment. But the problem is when there's not close proximity, where people are literally worshiping together, they are coming over to each other's homes, and the kids are knowing each other, and you have neighborhoods that are predominantly African American, you don't have those passing conversations anymore. I mean, people are really trying to make ends meet, raise kids if you're at that age, or just you know, survive in these times. And so it can become a more individual mindset versus a community mindset. And I think that our community has always thrived when we thought of each other more than we thought of ourselves individually. And that, I think, is more of a challenge. But I don't know if that's just with the Black community. I think in general, as Americans, we are more isolated and more individual in our thinking.
What do you think, Felicia?
So let me preface this by saying that I'm a graduate of HBCU and a big proponent of the Black church. So what I will say, there is a little bit of merit to what she says. And I'm going to go back to the Target. If we think about the Target boycott, it was wrapped around, I think, 3 facets. One was the Black church, right? The TargetFast.org that, you know, Jamal Bryan got smithereens from was built around, and honestly for me was the only reason why I heard about it, because it was a part of something that came up when I was at church. And then she talks about the HBCUs and that community, which definitely could be tighter, but we are definitely like proponents of our own HBCUs. But those are actually the ways, as Tone Falcon says, as how we can build community around. Like, that's the foundation. They won't all be the same. To your point, Keith, it's a little broad, But if we're trying to orchestrate strategy, we have to figure out large subsets, like she says, that we own, that we are proponents of, and that we wrap our arms around. And that may not mean us getting others who are not a part of those communities to be a part of it, but it is a start for how we build strategy around something that already exists and has foundation and legs, similar to the NAACP or other groups. We have to figure out how to use these for our advantage in terms of getting towards the goals that we want. So in some ways, I do agree.
So let me, and again, I cut it because I told her I wanted her to come on, because there was just a 20-minute interview, and I wanted her to come on because I wanted to push back on some of the things she said, right? And some of the things she is 100% right, right? And then to your point, some of them, Keith, are too broad, right? So I wanted to, but she had to go because me and Chris wanted to really, we were like,
Yeah.
oh, because
Talk about this thing.
yeah, let's talk about it, right? And she was down, but her chief of staff was saying she's got to go, so she's going to come on and we're going to dive into it. Here's the thing, but I want to get into her first statement. We don't give each other grace. Okay? Do you agree with that or not? Because let's be fair here. You can't have a strategy or create multiple strategies or have multiple groups if you're not supporting one another, or you don't give your own Black businesses opportunities, or if they mess something up, I ain't never going to them no more, and we've seen that, to be fair, right? And so at the end of the day, are we? And I get the individualism, I get that part, right? But do we see our people as excellent? Do we try to make sure that we support each other in the businesses or education or whatever the case may be? Are we going out of our way, regardless if I live in the suburbs or ex-burbs or whatever the case may be? Are we going out of our way to make sure we support one another? That's what I want to, that was her core message in the beginning, right? So I want to get you guys' thoughts on that. Plus the audience, I want to hear your thoughts. Do we support each other? Like, let's be fair. There's other groups that at the end of the day, let's be fair. They got each other's back 100%.
100.
Now, does that mean that they all are excellent and that they all doing the right thing? No. All right. But they got the Italians hang with Italians. They're making sure they're going to the restaurants. They're making sure they're doing this. They're making sure they're doing that. Jewish people making sure they're doing this. We can go on and on and on and on. Right. So I just want to hear your thoughts about that part of her diatribe.
We already know that's a no for us. we don't. And I think a part of it is that we are still holding up the banner of you have to work twice as hard, be twice as good. And when someone doesn't live up to this fallacy, like they make one mistake, that just happened a couple weeks with the Black owner Hanifa. She has a clothing line, and her product didn't do what it's supposed to do, and they murdered her on social media, right? Her product was still good, but she actually is experiencing the same challenges that a lot of businesses are experiencing. It's just because she was a Black-owned business that had she was murdered. And so we are holding ourselves to a standard that other communities don't hold themselves to. Now, should we be getting good products? Absolutely, right? Should our products be quality? Absolutely. But when mistakes happen, we don't give grace. We're like, I ain't never shopping with her again because her stuff came in 3 weeks late. And so there's a way for us to hold each other accountable without erasing each other. There's a way to do that. That two things can be true at the same time. And we don't do duality. It's either or. Either you're going to be a good business and you're going to be just like,
it's not be a good business. You got to be a perfect business.
Correct.
You see,
perfect.
See that's the thing. And there's no such thing. There's no such thing, right? So Keith, what's your thoughts, bro?
Yeah, I definitely think that we tend to nitpick each other in ways that we don't with the majority, to be honest with you. I don't know where it comes from, but definitely you see more solidarity when there's times of chaos, right? When there's time of upheaval, we tend to come together. And that's unfortunate because like the communities that you named, there is at least more outwardly, support for one another. Maybe there's more internal strife that we're not privy to, but it does appear to be more solidarity front facing when they, defend their community, when they shop with their community, versus what we just described, because that's what I found as well. I mean, I've had some people say, well, I don't want to get a black lawyer because, you may not get a fair shake. Now, I don't get that much pushback now because I had to really grind and grind and grind, but I didn't come in it with the presumption that I was maybe the son of somebody or had access to this judge or whatever.
And you had generations of lawyers in your family and all that type stuff.
Yeah. So there was a presumption that I may not be able to handle the system like some of my counterparts.
But see, here's the thing, though, brother. But that goes, and I'm glad let's just stop right there for a second, because I got it. Because I never even thought of that, to be honest. I don't want a black lawyer because I don't think you be influential enough. I never thought of that. But you've gotten that before, huh?
Absolutely, because you have to think the decision maker a lot of times doesn't look like me.
Right.
So, but there's fear associated with that comment. So I don't want to come off like I'm downing the person who thinks that way.
No. But it's not even about downing. Yeah. It's just understand, because I would have never thought that.
I didn't think about that either.
But to be fair, but I get it, to your point, right? Especially if your life is on the line.
Especially if your life is on the line.
You're for murder.
You care if you have a brown skin lawyer or a Jewish lawyer. You just want to get out of this situation in the best way possible. So I completely understand. But why is that where the mind goes, right? Because I'm qualified.
That's the point. Why does the mind take you to that?
Yeah.
Because we've seen instances of injustice, and it's woven into the fabric of our country, especially in the court system, especially in the Deep South. And so I think that's what I've always attributed it to. But as we see more success on the spectrum of African-American attorneys and judges, because that's the lens that I approach the conversation through. I think that tone has shifted, and I've seen it just in the 17 years that I've been an attorney. And so that's a bit of good news, but I can say that that's still the thinking that some people have.
Buddy, I just got this. Let me put this up. This is from Peter. He says, I find that there are many ethnic communities that don't give each other grace. So many complain that there are no restaurants or businesses with their food or goods, but then they never support them. So in other words, they don't support as well either. And once they do bring in those restaurants or goods in the community, they still don't support them. So I get that. We can't wipe a broad brush to everything, right? Because there's definitely going to be a lot of nuances, right? Hold on. What do we got here too? We have this, and I'm sorry if I can't see you guys' name. So many times we aren't excellent, but we're also overjudge and overreact, right? And then, but also black dollars are harder to earn. I believe we demand more perfection in product before we spend. So, and here's the thing, and I thank everybody for sharing your perspectives and stuff to that nature. I just think for us to create strategy, and we kicked this conversation off showing the civil rights clip in terms of how they came up with strategies to combat a lot of things, right? Community was tight. They had different strategies for different things, right? And they stuck to it. See, people don't recognize. I don't know how long the Target boycott was, right? But the Montgomery bus boycott was 367 days. Okay? So in other words, they did not ride the bus for over a year. All right. And so today you're like, so what? They could have took an Uber. The bus was the primary vehicle at that time because people didn't have cars. Okay. So for a year, people walked to work or carpool, and we're not spending our money here. And that was the reason they changed the law. It wasn't because of, some speech or anything like that. It was like, we're not spending our money here. We're dug in, and they did it for over a year. Do we have that type of resolve, right? I think to your point, and you guys both make good points. And I think this was more you, Keith. When something big happens, then people jump up. All right. But at the end of the day, can we do this without something big happening? Can we do this in terms of coming together as a community? And can we do this in terms of having different groups or different leaders or different individuals attack different things at different times and then communicate that across the gamut, right? Where it'll, so number one, the one thing that we've been dealing with is the awareness part, but now take it to an execution part from a strategy standpoint.
So let me say this, and I know this is controversial before I say it.
Oh, yeah,
We
you on the
talk a
right show,
lot. We talk a lot about the Montgomery bus boycott,
right?
okay? And we liken the Montgomery bus boycott that was in Montgomery, Alabama, that was localized there, to a larger context of sometimes the whole United States. And in some ways, that becomes problematic because that's not apples and apples. That's kind of apples and oranges. Because at the same time that the Montgomery bus boycott, remember when Martin Luther King left there, he went to the sanitation issue that was going on. So there were, again, multiple issues, multiple strategies. They were all doing at the same time, getting to the same place. But I think when we try to localize it to one thing, again, that we all should be rallying around, and we talk about the Montgomery bus boycott, I don't think we're doing apples to apples. I think we're doing apples to oranges.
So here's the thing, though. I hear that, right? I hear that, right? And so the reason I use was the stick-to-itiveness to it. There were multiple things being done. There was a boycott in Glen Echo, Maryland, okay, around an amusement park. And the majority of those people boycotted was Jewish people, okay? So there was a ton of things that a lot of people may not be privy to. So you're 100% right. There were a ton of things. And those people, they boycotted the whole summer because Black kids could not go to the amusement park, right? And at the end of the day, they were able to defeat that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just talking that anytime that you want change, there has to be some type of commitment, and most of the time it needs to be long term. Okay. And we live in a world right now where everything is microwave. It's instant. I want it now. Social media show, and so sometimes people think we scream, we holler, then change should happen. And it doesn't go that way. It goes through a long process of people and multiple people, to your point, and multiple groups all attacking it at different levels. Right. But I just think and look, let's be fair too. There could be a bunch of groups right now going on doing stuff that we don't even know about.
Absolutely,
right?
there is.
So we can't sit back and say exactly. So we can't sit back and say it ain't happening, right? But this is something that we need to have these conversations about, right? And we need to think about, and more importantly, push that idea to others. Okay, that's the five. So final thoughts. Let me get final thoughts from both of you guys. Keith, I'll start with you. Final thoughts, my brother.
Yeah, well, my final thought is that I believe it still starts at home. I still think it starts in our community, whether that is trying to touch children through youth sports or trying to empower the kids in your church or your community. I think that that's where it starts, because it's very hard now to pinpoint one singular issue that defines racism. I think that we have to empower the next generation, that they know their history. So many of our young people and adults may not know their history to the level that they should, that will give them the sense of pride, the sense of purpose, and the ability to say, you know what, it's my turn to run with this torch, because I see myself in the long lineage of people and it's my turn. I think that in isolation and in ignorance of your history, you tend to look at things individually and you tend to say, if it's not affecting me, it ain't my problem. And that is how things don't change on a larger scale.
I love it, my brother.
Yeah. I totally agree, Keith. I think while organizing around a cause or organizing around something as a larger group is super powerful. I think the power of one is so powerful. The thing that you see that's broken, the thing that you see that needs to be fixed, that you put in the time to do it, whether that's a part of a larger organization or to your point, just being a part of whether that's your church or whether that's going into the community, instead of waiting for somebody else to do it or pointing it out or us talking about it at a conference or a summit, when we leave there, what are we doing individually to bring change? And sometimes those things don't come to the surface because they're individual things, but they are powerful for that community and that organization. And so we all need to be thinking about what are the pain points that we see on a day-to-day basis as a Black person that's walking through this world, and then how do we make it a little bit better for the person who's coming behind us? How do we make it better for our sons and our daughters? And what do we need to do to educate them, to Keith's point? Because us just making it better without the context, then they lose the history and they don't know why we're doing. And so all those things become important as we move forward.
Well, number one, having people like yourself out in the community making stuff happen, I'm excited because you guys are just fantastic. Not only just leaders, but fantastic human beings. So knowing that we got people like you that's out and about chatting, talking about it, making things happen in your own communities makes me feel very proud. And more importantly, I know for a fact that your, your perfume will be spread across a ton of people, and you're going to help affect a lot of lives. So I want to thank, Felicia Smith, the CEO of The Climb, as well as Keith Johnson, defense attorney and juvenile court judge, for joining BEP Live and providing your perspectives.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. And look, don't forget to continue to check out a Black Executive Perspective Network. We have multiple shows on here. Need to Know with Dr. Nasinga Burton every Thursday. A Mixed Executive Perspective. New episode launches tomorrow on Wednesday. And Pull Up, Speak Up, which you're going to see these guys on, which is our roundtable where we dive into these very unique and hot button topics. So make sure you check out a Black Executive Perspective podcast. Go to our website, sign up for our newsletter, The Monthly Perspective. Actually, that's coming out tomorrow. It's April 1st. Okay. So you're going to get the monthly perspective. So definitely check us out. Follow us on our social channels of LinkedIn, X, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, at a Black Exec. For my fabulous guests, Keith Johnson, Felicia Smith, I'm Tony Tidbit. I miss my boy Chris P. Reed. He's traveling this week, but he'll be back next week. A new time for BEP Live starting next week, April 6th, I believe it is. April 7th, I think. Yeah, April 7th, BEP Live will be at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you put that on your dial. 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, Substack. We're on Substack now, so definitely check us out on Substack. But again, we want to thank you for participating, sharing your perspectives, and continue to follow us. We love you. I'm Tony Tidbit, and guess what? We're out.
A Black Executive Perspective.